Welcome to ND and NO, the podcast that empowers neurodivergent folks to say no to what doesn't work for them and yes to what does. Brought to you by Umbrella US and the ND23 Project. Whether you're a neurodivergent self advocate, a caregiver, an ally, or curious about advocacy in general, this podcast is for you. Episodes feature captivating conversations, interviews, and expert advice on self advocacy. Gain strategies to communicate your needs effectively and as you navigate the various contexts in life. Join the movement toward empowered self advocacy. Subscribe now to ND and NO, and let's journey from overwhelmed and undervalued to saying no to what holds us back and yes to what helps us move forward. And now, our host, Selena Gavin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to ND and NO. I'm your host, Selena Gavin. I am a African American and or Black female. It's okay to use both with me, but that is not generalized, okay? With long blonde and black braids. They're actually called goddess braids. And behind me is a fake blue brick wall in my office at work. I am not your usual host. Those of you who listen to the podcast work in know that that's my jam. I just wanted to give a little dig there. If you don't listen to it, you need to. Okay, enough about me. This is a live discussion panel, and we want to provide an opportunity for you, the viewers, to participate and in the discussion with our panelists about self-advocacy in all its context. We invite you to actually participate in the comment section. So it's right to the right of your screen, and you can participate right over there. Please remember that we embrace curiosity and invite different perspectives and opinions. We ask that everyone remember that we are all different. We're all at different levels, knowledge, and experience, and we really can come together and have compassionate discussions, even when we don't agree. Okay, so let's get started. Our panelists today are, I'm hoping that I'm saying the names right. Jennifer Alumba, referred to as she and they. Cato Lujan Camacho, referred to, his pronouns are he and him. And Scott Frassard, his pronouns are also he and them, or he and him, sorry. Now I'm going to move over to our first panelist, Jennifer. I want you to give a short description of your current environment and tell us a little about yourself.
Hello, thank you, Selena. I'm excited to be here and join this conversation. So I am a femme person who exists in a white body. I have sides of my hair are shaved and the top is wrapped up in a knot. Behind me is a blurred background, but there's a picture of multicolor flowers and a background tapestry that is like a blue-green galaxy scene. I have teal blue glasses and a red sweater and a multicolored bead necklace. And I am joining from the traditional unceded lands of the Tonkawa and Payaya peoples. That is currently known as San Antonio, Texas. And this is where I live and play and do my anti-racist neuro-inclusive work.
Beautiful. I have some questions about how you, some of the things you said in your description. It's very interesting. Thank you for that wonderful description. Next, we will move on to Cato. And I hope I said your name correctly when I mentioned it before.
Yes, you did.
Oh, cool.
Hafade, Guahu si Cataloan Camacho, or my name is Cataloan Camacho. My pronouns are he and him, and I am a multiracial Pacifica Gela man from Tacoma, Washington. I have short buzz cut hair, large gauge ears, a nasal piercing, and a large chin tattoo traditional to my people. I'm standing in front of my bed next to a railing behind which you can see a number of plants and a window.
Thank you so much for that description. I'm so happy I said your name correctly. My dad's name was Hermindo Martinez Estrella. So I gotcha. Okay, and our next panelist is Scott. Scott, can you give us a brief description of your current environment and yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Selena. My name is Scott Fassard. You did pronounce it correctly, Selena. Um, I'm a white male. I've got my pronouns are he, him. White male. I've got short brown hair and a beard that is getting to be mostly white now. I do have glasses on, and behind me is my office wall that's gray. I've got a few diplomas hanging on the wall and some hats. Um, I love Jennifer's edition of the ancestral lands. That's also something important to me. I won't pronounce these correctly, most likely, but I do want to recognize those who came before me in my current home of Houston, Texas. The Kawada, I can never pronounce this correctly. I apologize. Coahudacan, Carantwa, Sana, and Ishak peoples. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for that. You guys are going to have to elaborate on what he just said and help us further understand that later on. Right now, I have to do the boring stuff. I have to introduce the rules, okay? This panel discussion will be about 50 minutes. There's 15 minutes allotted per question. Each person is given 5 minutes to answer. Now, I know that this is so amazing, or I'm sorry, you're each given 4 minutes to answer. 5 minutes per question, or is going to be held on each question. It's okay if you go over. I'll give you a little sign. Usually I just kind of, and then you know that you're talking a bit much, even though everything you have is awesome to say, but we need to move on. Okay, you guys ready? Please be respectful of everything that is said and heard, and please remain respectful in the comments, private chats, if you choose to do so. Okay, our first question, and this is going to be for Jennifer. Why is self-advocacy important for neurodivergent folks?
Whew, no pressure to just dive right in. So I guess I forgot to introduce a couple other things, so I'm going to take a tiny bit of time. I'm a late identified autistic ADHDer, late identified as in like when I was 42. So lived a lot of life before then. I'm also a retired complex systems trauma therapist. And so the lived experience and some of the practice experience of spending 15 years working with neurodivergent folks is a little bit of the lens that I come from, as well as just kind of an additional like collective care, collective liberation, motivated practice. So that's a little bit more about me and like, who the heck am I to be coming in here and saying anything about any of these topics? So it's interesting when I looked at these questions in review, self-advocacy, I think of in terms of my relationship with myself. I know that I experienced a huge shift in how I treated myself from before coming into awareness of my autistic ADHD and like collection of other neurodivergences, and after the like big aha. In terms of the way that I was kind and compassionate in allowing myself to have needs, advocating them to my own self, like, hey, I'm tired, I need to rest, or this is overwhelming, I need a different sensory option. So I think for me that starts with my relationship with myself and being able to connect with myself. That has only been possible through like deconstructing internalized ableist, basically indoctrination, right? And continually doing that work in order to be able to show up for myself. Outside of myself, I see self-advocacy as a component of the greater collective advocacy, right? If I am speaking up to advocate for my needs, that shows a model to others, right? Like courage is contagious, and we can kind of bolster peer support in that way. But I also recognize like the various intersections of like privileged identity that I hold here in a white body. There are spaces that I may be in or conversations that I may be invited into that others may not. And I see the advocacy piece as part of like my responsibility to the collective to leverage any of those moments of privilege to be advocating not just for myself, but for the collective needs of neurodivergent folks. And so that I don't know where we are on time, but I
No,
will
that was,
pause there.
I love how you talked about the self-advocacy before you found out your diagnoses and after, because I know prior to myself finding out, I did a lot of self-hatred. I was really mean to myself and I isolated myself. And then here come to find out what, now there's a reasonable explanation for why these things are done the way they do or why I do them the way I do. So thank you so much for that response. Next, Cato. Why is self-advocacy important for neurodivergent folks to you?
Yeah. When I think of the importance of self-advocacy, a word that instantly comes to mind for me is compromise. And prior to really developing a strong sense of myself and my community, the entirety of my ND experience was built on compromise and compromise in favor of the other party,
Yep.
where I would outline needs that I had, there would be pushback, and I would instantly acquiesce. I would instantly put my hands up and say, you're absolutely right. The defect lies with me. And so by spending that time, just by virtue of being alive as long as I have, and learning a little bit more about myself and getting involved in my community, I've determined that to me, self advocacy is identifying my needs and respecting myself and honoring myself by upholding those, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because those are the baseline that I require to show up as myself in the world that I occupy. So, having self advocacy and understanding it as yourself and embodying that in our community is very essential because it's what everyone else is doing for themselves every single day. And so when we define our self advocacy by compromise, all we are doing is compromising the rest of ourselves.
That I must say that I think like compromise, assimilate, All of those terms of that. Oh my gosh, that was so powerful what you said, Kato. And, identifying what your needs are is what you feel self-advocacy is. And you don't care if others are uncomfortable. I always make other people feel uncomfortable, but I closed my mouth and hid because of that, because I was told, oh, you're too loud, you're too boisterous, you're too mean, all of those horrible things. So thank you so much for that, Kato. And you know who I'm coming to next? Scott.
Yes, I definitely feel what both Cato and Jennifer had said. So hopefully this won't sound like I'm repeating some of their answers. But like Cato had said, by self-advocating, I feel like I learn more and more about myself every time I do that. Every time I speak out, every time I write something online, every time I share a piece of who I am, I'm also learning more and really solidifying who I am. I also heard both talk about self-respect. And I think by standing up for who I am, advocating for my needs, for my experiences, for having a valid existence, even though it's different than others, I'm building self-respect, but also my self-efficacy too. Because I do have not just a self-advocacy aspect to my to advocating. I do advocate for the larger audience, but at the same time, I don't speak for all autistics. But there are a lot of people who do resonate with the words that I share, and there are many, many times, even today, getting that message from somebody who has thanks or other kind words to share about what I put out there for the public when it comes to advocating. And those things matter. I've touched somebody else's life, and they've returned that to me, and I feel like I've made a difference. And even though I'm really speaking from my own perspective, it does make a difference. I communicate what I need, and I think both of you had talked about this as well. And instead of just acquiescing, like Cato had said, to what everyone else wants, what everyone else feels comfortable with, when is it my turn? And that's part of self-advocating is I've got to feel comfortable with who I am, where I am, when I am, and there really isn't anything that I necessarily owe to the rest of the world other than to be a kind person to other people. And I would hope that would be reciprocated. And I think as I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple months, I believe that by self-advocating, we are normalizing the variability in the human experience by saying, this is how I am, who I am, what I need, what I think, what I feel, and there's nothing wrong with any of it.
Beautiful. I love the fact that I love when I get that positive feedback here. I deal with students ages 5 all the way up to 18, and I teach the 6 pillars of character, because I believe no matter what, who, or where you're from, those pillars mean something to each one of them. And it's very easy for me to sway them in that way. So thank you so much for that. And our next question. Now I'm going to ask you how self-advocacy has empowered folks that have multiple marginalized identities. How has it empowered them? And I think you guys actually probably already answered that. So you could, you know what I mean? Just reiterate. And this time we're going to begin with Cato.
Yeah. So when we look at multiple, and I want to add the caveat, intentionally marginalized identities, if we're talking about living in America, self-advocacy really recognizes that I am not experiencing my neurodivergent life in a bubble. I'm also experiencing it as an Indigenous person, as a transgender person, as a gay person, as someone who lives in the bioregion that I do. And because of that, even people who share my diagnoses, who share my background, who share my race, gender, culture, are having different experiences than me. So I cannot rely on other people who are analogous to me to be synonyms to my experience. We are not identical, and we have so much nuance, even in people who share so much community. And self-advocacy allows us to not only honor that in ourselves, but also honor each other. I would hate to put the burden of advocating for our community and speaking for our community on someone else just because I assume that they had the same experience as me. We are all almost radically unique, and it's to the point where it's sometimes,
Beautiful.
yeah, it can be very hard to find those similarities outside of our ND status, and finding those places where our multiple identities intersect allows me to have a much more authentic conversation about my neurodivergence.
Thank you so much for that, Cato. Scott, you're next. How do you feel? Oh, you probably already know the question. Go right ahead. I'm so sorry.
I've got two thoughts. I've got two thoughts. Number one, I want to believe that as I'm advocating for myself, it does help empower other people, if for no other reason than to know that they're not alone. That there are others out there who are different, that can speak about it. And who knows, maybe one day it will empower them to do the same and speak out about the same. But at the very least, even in silence or hidden from everyone else's view, they can feel I'm not alone.
Right.
And the second thing is, in doing that, I think there's a lot of power. And this is why I advocate the way I do, which is through critical reflection, Socratic questioning. If anyone's ever read my posts, that is 99% of what I post about. And I do believe in self-advocating and asking questions. We learn other perspectives, but in somewhere, and Cato started talking about this as well, somewhere in there is common ground. Even if we see something very differently, there is common ground, and that's something for us to build upon. And that, I think, is probably one of the most powerful outcomes from being able to self-advocate and multiplying the power of those out there doing this sort of work.
Thank you, Scott. Jennifer, have at it.
All right. And just to give a little context, when I'm snapping, I come from spoken word culture. And that's like call and response. That's me agreeing. So just in case anyone's watching, wondering, what is she doing?
Why is she snapping?
I know. That's my, yes, tell me more. So yeah, I mean, I certainly echo what Cato and Scott have shared, as well as thinking about just the historical experience of, I love how Cato made that caveat, intentionally marginalized identities, intentionally excluded identities, how part of that exclusion is being silenced, being made to be smaller, be less. I think I hear from so many late identified neurodivergent folks that they have heard through their whole life, I'm too, and then fill in the blank with anything and everything, too much, too sensitive, too loud, too passionate, too weird. And so I also see self-advocacy as a reclaiming of our voice, as a being audaciously expansive and taking up space in spaces, and you know, kind of going back to what Cato said also about not acquiescing to everyone else, but saying, no, I am worthy of being accommodated. I am worthy of like having space here. I think another component of self-advocacy that's important to talk about is the reality of the fact that sometimes our needs can be in conflict with one another, and it's still important for us to express that even amongst ourselves, right? Where I need low sensory input in order to recharge, and an office mate or a roommate or a partner may need high sensory input to be energized, right? It's still important for us both to advocate for those needs and have conversation around how do we share space together with opposing needs or with different needs, and what are the ways that we learn to kind of negotiate, not ignoring wholly either one of us, but just kind of navigating like, okay, so like maybe I can go over here when there's this room over here. I can go outside when I just need to like have low stim, and the other person can be inside with the radio blaring and the lights on, those kinds of things. So as we are self-advocating, I love how both Scott and Kato highlighted that while we do have shared experience and there is medicine in our Me Too's, there is also this, I love what Kato said, radical uniqueness amongst each of us. So it's the both and of we have some shared narrative, and also we have unique needs that must be normalized as human needs.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I took from that, one of the things you guys talked about with self-advocacy is we have to be okay with others, non-divergent, asking us those uncomfortable questions, or those questions that we ran from before, or the questions that we hid from before. We have to be all right now because we want to make this world a better place for the up and coming. So I hear a lot of times when individuals ask questions about race, ethnicity, gender, like I don't know what to call them or what to say. That's okay. Why do we get angry? You know what I mean? If we want to self-advocate for ourselves and for others, we need to teach. We need to teach and learn. So our next question is, if community care is so important, what are the benefits of promoting self-advocacy in communities? If we talk about community care, Scott?
So to me, I think the number one, from my perspective, benefit is social justice. And if we think about trying to create a society, whether it's local or global, where everyone deserves equal treatment, everyone is valid in who they are. We heard Jennifer just talked about that a moment ago. Everyone has intrinsic value and deserves to be happy, to live in a world that sees them as a human being. And I think by promoting self-advocacy in our communities, whether it's local all the way up to global, we can move the needle closer to a more egalitarian existence and bring about the social justice that our marginalized community desperately needs.
Thank you, Scott. Next, Jennifer.
Yeah, I love that. I think another piece, the word that comes to mind is like homogeneous, right? Like we are not. I think one of the pillars of neurodivergent culture is kind of like this awareness that there is no one right way. There are infinite possibilities around like how things can be done, how what learning styles, what interaction styles, what communication styles. And when we are promoting self-advocacy, we are making room for more than one narrative to exist simultaneously in a space. I think about some of the group spaces that I hold online for neurodivergent folks and the ways that we build collective care through self-advocacy of some folks, want to have their camera off, some folks want to chat in the comment, some folks want to be vocal, right? Each person taking up that virtual collective space in the way that best supports them is providing all of us with examples of this is how you can show up in this space. And we don't have to conform. We don't have to all be acting and doing the same way of like, okay, sitting straight, looking forward, eye contact, no movement, just, like little statues, right? When we are self-advocating, like we are meeting our own needs and that is going to look different. And we're making space for that to be the norm versus everything homogenized and like monochromatic, which is so boring.
Beautiful. I have a question for you, Jennifer. What would you say to a person who is saying, okay, you all say you're unique. I always used to say I'm weird in my own unique way. So, but then how do we expect society to conform to this uniqueness or to all these uniquenesses? Do you understand?
Yeah.
What would be your response to that? Like, we don't even have the money to do that, like, or the time. So what would you say?
I love that question. Thanks for asking it.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite way to answer this is I don't ever expect or want one person to have holding in their brain, okay, with this presentation, I have to like share this slide in 6 different ways and then this slide in 6 different ways, right? The idea of neuro inclusion and advocacy and accommodations and normalizing each other's needs is not for each of us to kind of hold this massive pile of needs for each other. Really, what I see at the heart is I challenge folks to lead with curiosity. So that looks like in the workplace, if someone, doesn't make eye contact, lead with curiosity over an assumption about what is happening, what energy, what mood, what attitude, right? If someone is fidgeting in a conversation or, sweating extra or being just anxious, lead with curiosity to wonder, maybe there's a whole lot of things going on with this person.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily mean, ooh, they're being shifty. Ooh, we can't trust them. Oh, they're just, rude and disrespectful. So I just, I would say if we can lead with curiosity rather than assumptions, then we don't have to hold all of the knowledge of all the possible accommodations and needs of everyone in our minds. We can just say, there's a place for people to show up differently, and I'm going to be curious about that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Cato, both questions. My question and the benefits of promoting self-advocacy.
Yeah, I think through all of this, something keeps coming to mind for me, and I'm gonna go in a weird place, and everybody, you guys just gotta come with me. You just gotta.
We love weird places.
Yeah. So we're talking about community. We're talking about self-advocacy. We're talking about divergence within communities, and I'm going to talk about plants. You see a few in behind me. I got a lot more behind me as well. Um, these are living beings existing within ecosystems, and each of them are evolved specifically to fulfill specific functions within those ecosystems. And I have taken them from those ecosystems, put them in pots, and shoved them in my apartment. And now they are having an experience that is divergent from the conditions in which they were evolved to survive and thrive. And sometimes that means they have leaves that turn yellow. Sometimes a whole bunch of weird stuff starts happening at one time, and I don't know how to react. But what's happening is I'm having those needs communicated, and I'm operating with the curiosity that Jennifer brought up. I don't have to, let me backpedal. It is not essential that I know how to respond to every single instance that occurs. It is sufficient that I remain curious about them and open to the possibility of learning. And so when we talk about our community and we talk about self-advocacy within our communities, we're talking about ecosystems and occupying a place in those ecosystems where the understanding is we have all evolved in order for this environment to work. And we know that that's not the case. I'm an indigenous person having a colonial experience, living on colonized lands. And the way that I am functioning and experiencing life is outside of my environment. I am existing in a space that is a potted plant in somebody's apartment going, my leaves are really yellow. Can you please be curious about why that's happening? So when we talk about when we talk about self-advocacy within a community, it's important to understand that all of my plants are sharing community right now, but they are all having a unique experience because some of them are from the African continent. Some of them are from Southeast Asia. Some of them are native to the United States, and their needs are varied. I don't know all of their needs. I don't know all of their scientific names. I have not understood them on a molecular level individually, but I have a vested interest in their well-being. And that is enough for me to do what I need to do to care for them.
I'm just going to tell you right now, Kato, everybody may not agree with me, but I almost said amen to that because it was like I was in church and you were preaching, okay? Because that is the truth. And I'm taking Jennifer snapping. I love that analogy. I tried to write down everything you said, and I plan on using that in a lesson with my children to teach them about differences, because sometimes it can be very difficult to try to instruct children on why this student needs this and you're not getting it, or this certain, you know what I mean? So that's amazing. I love that. That was amazing. Back to you, Scott. Did you want to answer my question, or did you have any thoughts on that? Or
can you ask it again just to make sure I'm responding to the correct question?
Yep. Okay. So what would you say? I had to think about that. ADHD and a stroke. I was like, oh my God, what was the question? Okay. Yes. What would you say to non-neurodivergents that respond to us? We say we're uniquely weird, we're all different, and they're like, okay, so you want society to conform to all these differences, there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough legislation to be able to accomplish that. What do you say to someone like that?
That's a tough one, because I think number one for me, I live by this belief that all perspectives are valid. So that's their perspective. That's their what they perceive as their lived reality, and so there's a validity in that. But at the same time, our perspective is lived reality as well. It is valid for us. So the thing that I think is really important is to set how we feel aside for a moment and listen. And both Kato and Jennifer addressed this. Be creative. And I love that quote that Jennifer said, lead with curiosity over assumptions. So instead of just assuming, okay, you're just being ableist, you're just looking at it through your perspective, I want to understand, why do you believe that? Why can't we accommodate others or accept others as being different? Why do you believe that? What do you value that puts that above everything else? Where did you learn this? And so, again, like Jennifer said, lead with curiosity. I'm not going to dismiss the validity of your lived reality because I've got mine that you would disagree with. But at the same time, let's talk about why that is. And I think in doing that, it does a few things. Number one, it helps us have more insight into what others see, so it broadens my worldview. Number two, I'm able to see things through their view and reflect upon my own and try to make meaning of why these differences exist. Somewhere in there is a commonality, like I talked about before, that we can build upon. But in doing all of that, and probably the one of the most important outcomes is it helps to build trust. And we can't create change if people don't trust us. And if all we're doing is countering and providing a counter argument to that perspective, I'm eroding trust. So that doesn't mean that I have to agree with their perspective. Their perspective can be empirically incorrect, but it is still a valid perspective because it is their lived experience, just as it is with me. And so I have to give that respect in order to get that respect.
Oh my gosh, you guys answered my question. Shut them down. Like, okay, we're gonna jump back to Cato, who has another comment.
Yeah, and I think Scott, you touched on this. Jennifer, you touched on this as well. But one thing that came to mind for me is that I really want to challenge neurotypical folks to divest from a scarcity mindset. There are enough resources, there is enough time, and there is enough energy for us to consider everyone. We are already doing this with things that we find interesting, that we find compelling, that we have energy for. And if we can find channels to extend that to each other, I think we're going to find that it's really easy to accommodate everybody in ways that are sufficient.
It is.
But living in a colonial society, we operate with a lot of scarcity. The idea that there is never enough time and never enough resources, never enough energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, there is. And we need to sit with the discomfort that comes with realizing that we have the capacity and there needs to be an intentionality rather than a systemic change in order for us to be inclusive of everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Cato. First we have two other comments. Okay, first we're going to go to Jennifer, and then we'll hop back down here to Scott. This is good. Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think in keeping with all this, I also think about, like how do we accommodate everybody? If we calibrate to the highest needs, that kind of captures everybody. There's examples like the curb cut in the sidewalk, right? How many people use that? People on skateboards, people with strollers, people in wheelchairs, and other, using walkers and other mobility devices. It's not just one person or one mode of transportation that uses that. And there's many examples that we have around us that show for, like, one example I used recently was like roads, right? There are many different vehicles, but as long as the tires go round, they can access roads. And, sure, there's specialized vehicles for off-roading, but for the most part, the main roads that we see in urban and developed areas, any vehicle, whether that's a car or a truck or an 18-wheeler or a bicycle or a motorcycle, right? They can all travel on that road. So I think for me, that's the piece that connects with what Kato said about like divesting from scarcity and
Mhm.
embracing abundance. Is we can make, they don't have to be even massive changes. Sometimes we can make small calibrations that that like allow room for everyone to join, and that makes a difference. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I just, I just had to respond to what Kato said about a scarcity of resources and kind of stepping away from that zero-sum game. And I just had to say that kindness doesn't have to be a scarce resource, doesn't have to be perceived as a scarce resource. Everybody can be kind to everybody else. And I think that's one of the things that can help mobilize a huge amount of change in a short amount of time.
That is, sum it up. That's exactly what we needed. Everyone, you answered that fourth question that you weren't prepared for amazingly. I thank you all. Is there anything else you guys would like to add? Maybe tell us about your. Do you have a blog, Scott, or is it a book? You were saying.
So I post quite a bit on LinkedIn. I do have a book forthcoming based on my posts. It's called A Reflective Question to Ponder, same as my post.
Okay.
I do have a second book that I'm in the midst of revising for publication next year at some point, that focuses on using Socratic questioning to advocate for social justice in the autistic community. And then another book that a colleague and I have just posted a call for contributions for, which will be compensated, of course, is it's going to be a collection of stories, essays, artistic works, song lyrics, whatever people want, and to express their experiences as a late identified adult autistic person. And we're going to, that call is out right now. We're going to close the call at the middle of December, but I'm excited that we've already got like 20 proposals in a week and a half. I think it's going to be a phenomenal book. Thank you for letting me self-promote there.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Jennifer or Kato?
Why don't you go, Jennifer?
Thanks. Yeah, so there's kind of two parts of the work that I do. I provide accommodations coaching and career coaching. I'm a new addition to the NeuroSpark team. So for folks who are kind of newly identified as autistic, ADHD, and wanting to get more support in their workplace, that's something that I can help them do with self-advocacy. Or sometimes folks are really like, wow, this job does not fit who I'm learning myself to be. I need something else that works with my brain and body. So I help folks kind of navigate that career search and stuff that goes on with that. The other piece of what I do is contracting with businesses and organizations who are interested in investing in building or expanding their neuro inclusion accessibility strategy. So I do trainings, I do consulting, really working with leaders to integrate neuro inclusion into the DNA of their organization, in order to like reap so many benefits, right? Like the employees win, it's good for business, all the way around. So those are the two offerings that I give to the world.
Oh my gosh, that's like my dream job. doing, you know, ND23 going out training individuals on how to set up their workplaces and all of these places to be more inclusive. Cato?
Yeah, we're just vamping. We're just like doing self
Yes.
promo. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Then, so my background is in the nonprofit space. Right now, I work in financial development, disrupting white supremacist structures and helping organizations determine that not all funding is good funding. And in my spare / personal time, I run my own consulting business that focuses on entrepreneurs and nonprofits and making their resources, their branding, their website, their marketing, their communication, both highly inclusive and highly relevant to the communities that they serve. One thing I'm really excited about that I worked on recently was an article called Our Cities Need More Art, Even the Ugly Stuff, where I talk about sensory impoverishment and the impact of multi-sensory experiences, especially on our marginalized communities.
I need for all neurodivergent and non-neurodivergent individuals who are listening to this, do you see what we have to bring to the table? Do you see what we already do? And there's so much more, so much more. I want to thank you, Jennifer, Cato, and Scott, so much tonight. Anyone, if you have any questions, you can keep chatting in the private chat, but we're sounding off tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.